And, all of this is very cool. And I do want to take a step back, though. I want to think a little bit more about strategy. So, something that's been on my mind has been, India framed its strikes as limited and precise, arguing that it was targeting terrorist infrastructure, not Pakistan's military. The message was this is controlled, this is restrained, and this shouldn't escalate. Now, Pakistan, of course, saw it differently. It called the strikes an act of war, saying they violated its sovereignty and hit civilian areas. In Bahawalpur, India targeted what it claimed to be Jaish-e-Mohammed headquarters, specifically the Markaz-e-Subhanallah or Subhanallah Mosque. And in Muridke, it targeted Lashkar-e-Taiba headquarters. Sites in Sialkot and Chakargag were also targeted. Now, India has long labeled these groups as terrorist groups due to their attacks in Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir. And since 2002, Pakistan has also banned both groups. But there is enough evidence over the past 2 decades, at the very least, that indicates that both groups are active within Pakistan and enjoy a safe haven. Regardless, Pakistan viewed these attacks as a violation of its sovereignty, as something that I said before. So, from Pakistan's perspective, its response to India's attacks was defensive and measured. And this is where things get a bit more complicated because Pakistan has actually used a very similar argument in its own strikes across the border into Afghanistan, framing those operations as counterterrorism, targeting the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan with the TTP, and insisting that they're limited and justified. But just like in this case, the receiving side, which is the Taliban government, has often viewed those strikes as violations of sovereignty and acts of aggression. So what you see is kind of like a mirror dynamic. Now, India believes it's restoring deterrence in a controlled way and suggests Pakistan has the option not to respond. Pakistan, on the other hand, sees the initial strike as aggression and feels it has no choice but to respond to restore deterrence. So, right from the start, both sides are operating with completely different assumptions about what's actually happening on the ground and what needs to happen next.
These are good points, Summer, but I have to ask, if both sides stopped, doesn't that mean escalation was controlled?
Or it means we just got lucky because technology is pushing us in the opposite direction. And one of the biggest changes here is speed. Technology has compressed decision making in a way that political leaders can't fully keep up with. For example, take the air battle. When a J-10 fires a long-range missile at those speeds, pilots just have to, they have seconds to react. There's barely any time to process what's happening, let alone respond effectively. Now, layer in drones. When Pakistan launched saturation drone attacks, India's air defense teams had to make split-second decisions, figuring out what was a real threat and what was just a decoy. And they had to do that faster than any political leadership could monitor in real time. So what you're seeing is a system that is moving faster than the people in charge of it. And that's a real risk because as militaries modernize and operate at higher alert levels, the margin for error gets smaller. And here's where it gets even more complicated. India's precision strike capabilities, being able to hit targets deep inside Pakistan with a high degree of accuracy, can actually create a sense of confidence, even control. But that confidence is misleading because even if a strike itself is precise, the consequences, how the other side reacts, how things escalate, are much harder to predict and much harder to control. So precision doesn't necessarily reduce risk. In some ways, it actually increases it.
So basically, technology doesn't help control escalation, but does it encourage restraint?
I mean, to be honest, that's unclear. South Asia, despite all the crises, has actually been a pretty good example of restraint. And that might sound counterintuitive, right?